Hello and welcome to Global Lens. Over the next 30 minutes, we put the spotlight on all the top stories from around the world. I'm Parikshit Luthra. Let's focus now on the Russia-Ukraine war. Russian President Vladimir Putin warned European leaders that any Western troops deployed to Ukraine would be legitimate targets for Moscow to attack. This comes amidst the recent commitment made by European leaders to put an end to Russia-Ukraine war and reiterating the need for security guarantees. That's not all. He went on to say if Ukraine and Russia are able to reach an agreement, then having the troops in Ukraine soil make no sense. He didn't stop there. He went on to blame Ukraine for the conflict. He claimed till the time Ukraine does not abandon its aspiration to join NATO, this conflict is set to continue. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump took to Truth Social to state, and I quote him, "Looks like we've lost India and Russia to deepest, darkest China. May they have a long and prosperous future together." End of quote. President Trump's post was accompanied by a photo of Prime Minister Modi, Putin and Chinese President Xi from the SCO summit, which was held in Tianjin, where they were sharing a lighter moment. US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who was on CNBC earlier today, has said India's decision to import Russian oil was wrong. He also told Bloomberg that India will have to decide which side it wants to pick and that India will apologize to Trump. Lutnick's remarks were the latest in a series of comments made by Trump administration in the past. Just recently, White House trade advisor Peter Navarro accused India of being oil money laundromat for the Kremlin. India rejected this comment by Navarro, calling it inaccurate and misleading.
We have seen the inaccurate and misleading statements made by Mr. Navarro, and obviously we reject them.
All right, let me now go across to John Herbst, former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine and senior director at the Atlantic Council. Ambassador, thank you very much for being with us on the program on Global Lens. Let me begin by asking you what's happening with U.S. and India, first of all, because it's directly connected to the Russia-Ukraine war. The president has linked relations with India to what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. And everything is being determined as a result. Even a trade deal is contingent on that. But is there now a rupture between India and US? Look at the way President Trump is speaking. Lost India, Russia to deepest, darkest China. He also said, I wish them a bright, prosperous future. Howard Lutnick, the US Commerce Secretary, literally going on record to Bloomberg and saying India will have to say sorry. So these are very strong statements. Would you say there is now a rupture in India-US ties?
Okay. I think that over time, national interest in both the United States and India will drive our two countries closer together. India, the great adversary is China. That's the same great adversary for the United States. But the relationship between India and the United States is complicated by the fact that India has been a close partner, first of the Soviet Union, and now for Russia, despite Moscow's egregious war on Ukraine. And India benefits from that war because it buys Russian oil at cheap prices. But at the same token, that provides support for Russia to wage the war. And that war is very much against American interests. So I think this is a problem in the bilateral relationship, and this problem may linger for some time, but eventually we'll move beyond this because, again, in the longer run, China, again, is the great foe of the United States of India. And as you know, China and Russia are very close. So India's closer relationship with Russia is also a complication as it tries to deal with China.
Right. So even as you say that there is no long-term rupture, the ties remain intact. In the short run, do you believe that any kind of trade agreement between India and US can happen without the war coming to an end and without India stopping the purchase of Russian oil?
I think that there are often ways to get around difficult problems. In this case, there could be compromise in the sense of, well, again, this is purely speculative. I'm not in the Trump administration, but India, for example, could reduce substantially purchases of Russian oil, and signal that to the Trump team, and see if this might do it. I don't rule that out. I also don't rule out other ways that India and the United States may continue to cooperate, especially in the Western Pacific, again, where China is the problem for both the United States and India, even as we have differences over India's purchase of Russian oil.
Right. Those are important points. Now, let me ask you about the current complications around the Russia-Ukraine war. The French president has gone on to say that 26 countries have promised post-war security guarantees for Ukraine, including international forces on land, sea and air. The exact plans have not been revealed. Do you believe this could complicate the negotiations with Russia?
Look, Putin has no interest in negotiating a peace in Ukraine. He wants to seize more Ukrainian territory, a lot more. So I think what's happened with these security guarantees is a step towards ending the war, not the war the way Putin wants to end it, which is conquering Ukraine, but a war which enables Ukraine to exist as a sovereign, independent, and secure state. Of course, Putin doesn't want European troops in Ukraine. That gets in the way of him taking more Ukrainian territory. But again, Putin's the aggressor.
You're right. But at the same time, you have Vladimir Putin, who's also gone on record to say that if European forces intervene, then Western forces could be a legitimate target for Moscow's military. Could there be a risk of a larger escalation?
I'll tell you this. Putin's army is rather pathetic, right? They've spent 3.5 years. They've lost over 1 million casualties. They've taken 20% of Ukrainian territory. That's it. Basta. Not much. Putin does not want to fight with NATO. If the Europeans were to go in and he didn't worry about American support for the Europeans, he might make them a target. But there's a very serious conversation going on right now between the Trump administration, Macron, Zelensky, Merz, etc., about how the United States would backstop European forces in Ukraine. And remember, it was the Trump team that began to talk about European troops deploying to Ukraine. So I think Putin will huff and puff and threaten. But if the Europeans deploy with solid guarantees from the United States of support, I think Putin would be very, very, it'd be unlikely that Putin would actually shoot at them. Right. And if he did, his forces would face very severe response. Do you remember what happened when Russian forces were shooting at Americans in Syria during Trump's first term? Didn't end well for those Russian forces.
No, that's an important point, Ambassador Herbst. But I would also like to ask you, can this war ever really end fully? Because that's what some foreign policy analysts have said, that this may continue well beyond 2030, but we may see some sort of breakthrough. Isn't this a worry as well in the US and in the diplomatic corps, that President Trump is now looking at some sort of a exit from the Russia-Ukraine war, but will any sort of breakthrough lead to lasting peace?
Everything you've just described in this interview so far points to Trump not backing away from support for Ukraine, but Trump trying to achieve his stated goal of a durable peace. Zelensky wants a durable peace. Trump wants a durable peace. The one man who does not want a durable peace is Putin. And Trump understands that Putin has played him, tapped him along, to use Trump's phrase, and he's not happy about it. So it's conceivable, if Western support were to weaken, that this war could last for some time. It's also conceivable, if Western support were to grow substantially, provide far more advanced arms to Ukraine, truly smack the already stumbling Russian economy with sanctions, this war could end as Putin realizes he can take no more of Ukraine and he has to accept a durable peace. That, to me, is the only way to achieve peace in Ukraine, which means peace in Europe.
Right. And what extent is President Trump, according to you, and this administration willing to go in terms of stopping Russia if the European allies want to put boots on the ground? Is he going to support that? Is he going to join an alliance with Europeans against Russia to support Ukraine?
Well, he has not used the word alliance in connection with ending the war in Ukraine. And we all know that Trump thinks that Ukraine should not become a member of NATO, at least not anytime soon. But Trump has said, again, his team put the concept of deploying European troops to Ukraine after a ceasefire is achieved on the table even before the election. And Trump has had many very friendly conversations, cooperative conversations with Macron and Starmer and Merz and Stub about this, and Zelensky too, I might add. And regarding support for the European troops, Trump has mentioned American air power. He's also mentioned American contract soldiers. In other words, not American troops, but former American troops who go in as contract soldiers. So all these things, American air power could certainly persuade Russia that it would be very stupid to shoot at European soldiers in Ukraine.
Ambassador, I'll come back to India. While India is not stopping the supply and purchase of Russian oil, we are still the second largest purchaser. There are about 10 purchasers of Russian oil. China is number one. Then you've got India, you've got Turkey, and you've got other nations. And we continue to be in the top two. Having said that, since the time the 50% tariffs came into effect, India has stepped up diplomatic efforts behind the scenes to speak to both Ukraine and Russia. The Prime Minister has spoken to Ukrainian President twice. Following that, he spoke to Putin for almost 2 hours in Tianjin, in China. We've spoken to the European Union President yesterday. The Prime Minister had a direct conversation. They spoke about ending the war, supporting all efforts to make peace. And then today you had the External Affairs Minister of India speaking to his counterpart in Ukraine about ending the war, about the road to peace. You know, we will never probably get to know the nitty-gritties of it. But somewhere, do you think there will be an appreciation in the United States that while India is not backing down on its largest strategic partnership with Russia, they are making efforts to end the war?
Look, I commend these efforts, but I think they will achieve almost nothing. Putin is not going to be persuaded by words that he needs to stop his aggression in Ukraine. He'll only be persuaded when he realizes that this war is damaging his economy in dangerous ways and that he will not be able to prevail on the battlefield. And for that, you need sanctions. For that, you need weapons. That's the way to achieve a durable peace. So I think this will be an irritant, maybe even a large irritant over the short run between New Delhi and Washington. But again, if there are smart leaders in both capitals, I say if there are smart leaders in both capitals, they understand the longer term interests which we share, India and the United States. So we can at least partly protect them as we try to work out this current problem.
Right. Ambassador Johnny Herbst, thank you so much for joining us on the program, giving us your view on the Russia-Ukraine war and what India could do to assist the United States at this point, because clearly for the White House and Donald Trump, this is a priority. Everything is being linked to the Russia-Ukraine war and stopping it and helping them achieve that goal. We're taking a short